Hungary has unexpectedly authorized lethal force. 2 Ukrainian reconnaissance aircraft were intercepted and shot down in the immediate vicinity of the border. The diplomatic atmosphere within the European Union instantaneously shifted from simmering tension to a boiling point, and the ominous phrase, "the alliance is on the verge of fracture," has ceased to be mere hyperbole. Amidst a Europe that still clings to its self-image as a bastion of stability, a landscape where citizens expect to sip their morning coffee in undisturbed peace, explosions in the airspace have suddenly transformed a seemingly dormant corner of the frontier into a volatile new flashpoint, driving the region's geopolitical temperature to critical levels. Hungary and Ukraine, 2 nations cohabitating within the common European home, who once exchanged handshakes and warm diplomatic pleasantries, now regard one another with the hostility of mortal adversaries. Diplomatic discourse has devolved far beyond moderate disagreements across the conference table. The 2 sides have escalated their conflict to a dangerous new tier, transitioning from rhetoric to kinetic firepower. Bilateral relations have deteriorated to such an extreme depth that officials in Brussels and even NATO command were startled by the intelligence reports as if shaken awake from a complacent slumber, dropping their morning coffee in the process. What were the catalysts that caused this situation to spiral so rapidly? Where does the culpability lie? Who is right and who is wrong? Who is pouring fuel onto the fire in this confrontation between a nation at war and a member of the European Union? All of these details will be declassified and revealed shortly, and before we delve into the operational briefing, if you find geopolitical analyses of this nature valuable, you can support our coverage by liking, sharing, and subscribing to ensure you do not miss future intelligence updates. The shooting down of an aircraft, was it merely a thunderous warning shot? Or was it the opening salvo of a new series of conflicts striking right at the heart of Europe? This question emerged simultaneously with an event that has sent shockwaves throughout the entire region. According to reports from Hungarian state media, the nation's air force intercepted and destroyed 2 Ukrainian reconnaissance aircraft. The incident transpired near the city of Tokaj in northeastern Hungary, situated merely a few dozen kilometers from the Ukrainian border. The 2 aircraft were accused of violating sovereign Hungarian airspace and exhibiting profiles consistent with conducting a sensitive reconnaissance mission. Less than an hour after the 2 airframes were downed, the entire Hungarian air defense network was placed on a high alert status. Mobile mechanized battalions and surface-to-air missile units rapidly redeployed to potential hotspots along the border zone. Key transit routes in the area were interdicted, and military control activities were significantly ramped up. This is assessed as the first instance since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict that an EU member state has directly utilized kinetic force against Ukraine on the ground, and in an extremely sensitive geopolitical context, Ukraine has maintained operational silence thus far, offering no official confirmation from Kyiv regarding the loss of the 2 reconnaissance assets. But with relations between the 2 capitals in free fall, Kyiv's avoidance of the subject does not equate to a complete denial of the incident. Defense analysts posit that the silence at this juncture may be a calculated effort to de-escalate the situation, aiming to prevent a tactical military clash from spiraling into a full-blown strategic crisis between an EU candidate nation and a full EU member state. However, the unfolding reality on the ground indicates that tensions have far surpassed disputes over linguistics or the rights of minority communities. This is no longer a routine diplomatic skirmish, but a tactical confrontation backed by force, which possesses the potential to escalate at any moment if either party makes a miscalculation. While the international community remains in a state of shock, the atmosphere in Brussels is fraught with tension, and a question that is keeping many policymakers awake at night is beginning to surface. Was the shot fired in the skies near Tokaj just a warning, or was it the inaugural salvo in a new sequence of conflicts between 2 countries that are both integral parts of the European space? The answer is partly reflected in the maneuvers occurring on the ground. Hungarian main battle tanks are rapidly advancing toward the Ukrainian border, creating the distinct impression that a confrontation is being actively prepared. Following the downing of the 2 Ukrainian reconnaissance aircraft, the security situation in the Hungary-Ukraine border sector continues to escalate in an increasingly perilous direction. According to local media outlets and military analysis channels, the Hungarian defense forces have deployed a series of tanks, armored personnel carriers, and infantry personnel to at least 5 strategic checkpoints along the frontier with Ukraine. The Hungarian government has not issued an official communiqué, but imagery and video footage recorded by local residents and disseminated on social media reveal an overwhelming presence of heavy military hardware, ranging from main battle tanks and armored carriers to mobile radar systems and combat logistics units. All of this points to unambiguous preparations for a worst-case scenario, what many experts describe as an active defense plan, implemented under a state of emergency. Notably, this massive military maneuver comes merely days after Ukraine publicly accused Hungary of organizing a clandestine spy network in Transcarpathia, a region in western Ukraine inhabited by tens of thousands of ethnic Hungarians, according to a statement from Kiev. 2 former Ukrainian military personnel were arrested on charges of transferring classified information related to defense systems and troop deployments to Hungarian intelligence agencies. The coincidence in timing has led many observers to conclude that Budapest's increased military footprint is not merely for general deterrence purposes. It appears to be a direct and muscular response to what they perceive as provocative actions emanating from Kiev. Moving armored columns close to the border acts as a silent but extremely lucid warning. Hungary will not stand idly by if it perceives that its sovereignty or the Hungarian community in Ukraine is threatened. In the eyes of analysts, if these military escalations are not contained, the Transcarpathia border region could easily evolve into the flashpoint of a full-blown crisis within the European Union, a scenario where 2 countries from the same bloc now stand on opposite sides of the front line. What began as a seemingly isolated counterintelligence arrest quickly metastasized into a diplomatic earthquake between Kiev and Budapest. While the conflict with Russia shows no signs of cooling down, Ukraine now faces a new crisis front in the West, and this time, the adversary is not Moscow, but a country considered a nominal ally, immediately after the incident was exposed. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha issued a stern warning. He not only demanded that Hungary expel the 2 senior diplomats involved, but also summoned the Hungarian ambassador to the Foreign Ministry headquarters to deliver a formal letter of protest. In his statement, Mr. Sybiha characterized the espionage activities as a blatant betrayal, a stab in the back of a country struggling to defend its borders in the face of a full-scale conflict. However, Hungary did not choose to capitulate. Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó immediately rejected all accusations, labeling it an organized smear campaign initiated by Ukraine to discredit Hungary on the international stage. From Budapest's perspective, Kyiv is deliberately manufacturing tension to exert pressure, attempting to force Hungary to alter its stance on key issues such as military aid to Ukraine or the country's application to join the EU. Within 48 hours of the initial statements, both sides simultaneously expelled each other's diplomats. This is a rare and severe step in relations between 2 countries closely tethered to the European structure, one a full EU member, the other a strategic partner and accession candidate. This development has left Brussels and Berlin frozen, as the EU has almost never witnessed a similar precedent of hostility between 2 sides that are considered to be under the same political roof, and it arrives at a juncture when Europe desperately needs unity to navigate a series of other geopolitical challenges. At the epicenter of all tensions between Hungary and Ukraine lies not only contemporary politics but also a region steeped in centuries of complex history, Transcarpathia. This region, also known as Zakarpattia in some sources, lies in the extreme southwest of Ukraine, sharing borders with Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, and Poland. Transcarpathia is not only strategically located, but is also home to more than 150,000 ethnic Hungarians, accounting for nearly 13% of the region's population. For a long time, it has been likened to a cultural hinge between Eastern and Western Europe, where ethnic groups, languages, and religions intertwine. The history of Transcarpathia is a series of turbulent transitions. This territory was once part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, then passed to Czechoslovakia, and was occupied by Hungary from 1939 to 1945 during World War II. Transcarpathia was subsequently incorporated into the Soviet Union and only became part of independent Ukraine after 1991. For many Hungarians, especially the political elite in Budapest, Transcarpathia still retains a sacred historical and ethnic value. They do not hesitate to declare it the historical land of the Hungarians. Many residents here still speak Hungarian, hold Hungarian passports, and maintain close ties with their ancestral homeland in the West. This ethnic connection keeps the Ukrainian government constantly on guard. Kyiv fears that Budapest harbors ambitions to covertly intervene or regain influence in the region, especially as the war with Russia exposes vulnerabilities in its territorial control system. For Ukraine, Transcarpathia is not just an ethnic issue, but a potential time bomb concerning sovereignty, identity, and regional influence. With suspicion acting as the fuse, every move by Budapest from language and culture funding to passport policies can be viewed by Kyiv as a form of soft invasion. Among these simmering conflicts, language constitutes the deepest rift in Ukraine-Hungary relations. In Transcarpathia, it is almost a clear dividing line, exposing the long-standing fracture between Kyiv and the Hungarian minority community. Following prolonged political turmoil and conflict, the Ukrainian government implemented a series of national language unification policies. Ukrainian was placed in a position of exclusivity within the education, administration, media, and public services systems. This meant that the official usage of minority languages such as Russian, Hungarian, Romanian, and Slovak was significantly curtailed. In Transcarpathia, home to a large Hungarian-speaking demographic, the consequences are becoming increasingly apparent. Many schools have been forced to transition from Hungarian language teaching programs to exclusively Ukrainian language curriculums. Bilingual signs are gradually being removed from the landscape. Hungarian language television broadcasts are being restricted. Most importantly, the local population feels that their cultural identity is being eroded step by step. It is these changes that have prompted Hungary to repeatedly voice strong opposition at international forums, particularly within the EU. Budapest views Ukraine's policy as a form of administrative forced assimilation, undermining the right of minority communities to preserve their language and culture, contrary to the international commitments Ukraine has signed. Conversely, Kyiv defends its decision on the grounds of national security imperatives. In a country torn apart by war and ethnic conflict, strengthening the central role of the Ukrainian language is seen as a necessary measure to assert sovereignty, territorial unity, and reinforce national identity. Caught between these two opposing positions, the people of Transcarpathia have become embroiled in the political vortex. Language, instead of serving as a bridge, has become the deepest rift, and right on that rift, the EU is witnessing an increasingly uncontrollable confrontation within its own ranks. The confrontation between Ukraine and Hungary is no longer limited to bilateral tensions. It is exposing deep structural cracks within the European Union, a bloc built on the foundations of unity and mutual trust. When one country is accused of spying on another and worse, an ally within the European system, trust immediately collapses. The image of a common European home is shaken to its core. Hungary has long been the outlier within the EU, under the leadership of Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Budapest has consistently opposed the bloc's common line, particularly on the issue of Ukraine. While most EU countries are pouring military and political aid into Kyiv, Hungary has chosen to stand aside on many important decisions, even maintaining warm relations with Moscow despite Western sanctions. Not only that, Budapest is also one of the countries strongly opposing Ukraine's accession to the EU, causing President Volodymyr Zelensky to publicly criticize Hungary many times as a false ally, an EU member that did not stand by Kyiv in its hour of need. The recent espionage incident, coupled with the kinetic engagement of the Ukrainian planes, can be seen as the final straw, dispelling any illusions that the relationship between the two countries was merely one of strategic disagreement. Although Hungary claims that all actions were for self-defense, this is the first time an EU country has used force against Ukraine on the ground. This risks triggering a dangerous chain reaction across the bloc. Observers in Brussels fear that if the EU does not quickly reconcile and find a common voice, this incident will set a detrimental precedent, pushing the bloc into a state of deep fragmentation. Europe stands on the fragile line between the ideal of unity and the reality of division, and that line has never been so fragile. Transcarpathia, a multi-ethnic region, is also the battleground of a silent war of influence. In southwestern Ukraine, it is not just a geographical unit, but a place that embodies many layers of cultural, ethnic, and historical identity. The population of Transcarpathia consists of at least 6 major communities: Ukrainians, ethnic Hungarians, Roma, Slovaks, Romanians, and Russians. It is like a complex tapestry, in which each thread possesses its own color and narrative. Many people living in Transcarpathia do not easily identify themselves with just one nationality. They are the product of a history of constant territorial flux, from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, through Czechoslovakia, then Hungary and the Soviet Union, before becoming part of present-day Ukraine. The result is a hybrid identity, where Hungarian is spoken alongside Ukrainian, and Catholicism, Orthodox Christianity, and Judaism coexist in the same small town. It is this very diversity that makes Transcarpathia the most vulnerable to media wars, propaganda, and political manipulation. For Hungary, this is not only a place where ethnic Hungarians live, but also a historical symbol, a part of the national heritage that Budapest wants to maintain influence over. For Kiev, consolidating loyalty in this region is a vital priority in its efforts to preserve sovereignty and territorial integrity. Notably, since Russia launched its special military operation, a segment of the population that had previously leaned toward Hungary has changed its stance. They have joined the fight, accepted sacrifice, and gradually feel more attached to Ukraine, but this very change has caused Hungary to fear that its cultural and geopolitical influence in Transcarpathia is gradually waning. In Budapest's eyes, the current crisis is only the beginning. At the bloc level, the EU is entering a vortex from which it is difficult to find a way out. The current situation shows that tensions between Ukraine and Hungary are not only showing no signs of cooling down, but are also gradually escalating, moving closer to a full-blown crisis. Hungary's deployment of troops near the border, Ukraine's arrest of citizens accused of espionage, and the two countries' mutual expulsion of senior diplomats in less than 48 hours all show that bilateral relations have gone beyond the normal limits of diplomacy. Analysts say this could be the most serious diplomatic crisis in the modern history of the European Union. This is because it is not just a conflict between two European countries, but also puts Brussels in an unprecedented predicament, with Ukraine, a strategic partner, fighting not only for sovereignty but also for the values the EU proudly represents, such as democracy, the rule of law, and territorial integrity. The EU cannot turn a blind eye, but on the other hand, Hungary remains a full member, with veto power, a voice, and allies within the bloc. If Brussels takes strong disciplinary action against Budapest, the risk of internal rifts is inevitable. In this tangled web of interests, principles, and political realities, one thing is clear: this crisis has only just begun, and it is likely to be longer, more complex, and more dangerous than anything the EU has faced before. The story between Ukraine and Hungary is not just about borders, language, or espionage. It is a microcosm of a crisis of trust, a growing divide in foreign policy, and a sign of the uncertain future of a Europe fracturing from within. Is this incident just a temporary wave, or a sign of a larger storm approaching? Can the European Union maintain its unity when its members are beginning to view each other as rivals? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Goodbye, and see you in the next issue.